Hello again and welcome back to Laurence Plays Factorio Planetary Pioneers. Will you join me once again on Nauvis? Because today I'm going to have a look round at some of the quality improvements we've made in the factory over the last couple of streams. And these have all been coming about because Marc has decided that it'd be quite nice to have some higher quality products being made on Nauvis, allowing us to then use them for upgrades around the solar system wherever we need them. And the most obvious place to use these is on spaceships because you have a lot less space available, ironically. And therefore it's much more useful being able to have single examples of machines that are working better and more effectively, or maybe faster, than it is to actually just squeeze in more of the normal machines. So for example, along here you can see we've got a lot of the tier 3 grabbers. And then whenever we need something, they're far more effective because each one has 3 arms and therefore can grab a lot more rocks as they're coming in. Now, of course, typically as I'm saying this, there aren't any rocks needed, so we're not grabbing any. But I'm sure, there we go. Any moment now, there they go. So you can see each grabber now has 3 arms, which means they can pick the rocks out of space 3 times as fast. Similarly, having better quality weapons is useful on these ships because you can get a little bit of extra range out of them. We don't seem to have any of those on here yet, but we may well do at some point in the future. And again, having better quality machines can be handy because it means you don't need as many machines in order to get the same level of output. And when you're sort of slightly cramped and you don't have an infinite amount of space to play with like you do on planets, that can be quite nice. And so the first one of these improved quality modules that we're going to take a look at is the green circuit production over here. And you've seen these sort of things before, but Marc has gone in and improved this one and set it up to use quality modules in lots of the machines, or at least in the relevant machines. And so this one is bringing in molten iron over here, molten copper over here on the other side, and that's being brought in to then be turned into iron plates in order to be for the substrates of the circuit boards, and then into copper cables to then be passed over and made into the actual circuits themselves along with the iron. As usual, because we've got hot metals installed, we have some cooler chests along here, and those are for the cables or the plates to be passed out into while they cool off briefly, and then they can be passed on into the machines over here. And with foundries, there are a couple of different ways that you can make copper cables in order to make your circuits. The first way, which we're using here, is to make your electrical cables out of molten copper, and that takes 2.5 molten copper to make each electrical cable. Plus, you get the bonuses of whatever you put into your foundry, which in this case is going to be plus 50% for the foundry itself, and then an extra 24% from the modules in the foundry. So we're getting a plus 74% productivity. But that'll be the same for every foundry we use. The other way to do it is to turn the molten copper first into copper plates, and that takes 10 molten copper per plate, plus again all of those productivity modules we just talked about, and then use an EM plant to turn that copper plate into additional copper cables, and that takes half a copper plate, or in other words, 5 molten copper. So that means if we look back at the original electric cable from molten copper recipe, that means that this is twice as efficient. However, there is one additional note in here, and that is that you get an extra boost in your productivity from using an EM facility and the number of modules you can put in there. And with tier 2 modules, that will get you a plus 80% productivity bonus, which is pretty good. And that means the two recipes are nearly the same. However, doing it this way, with making the molten copper directly into cables, is better than doing it through the 2-step process, at least until you get productivity modules that are worth at least 10% each. And currently we do have prod 3s available, and so that means we could do a break even between doing it this way and doing it by making plates and then making the plates into cable, but we can't go any higher than that. In the future, however, we are going to make productivity module 4s, and those give you a productivity bonus of 15%. And so when combined with an EM plant which has 5 module slots, that will give you a 75% productivity bonus, plus the built-in productivity of the EM plant, which is another 50, so that's 125%. And so at that point, if you're going to start putting productivity 4s in there, then you would be better off making your copper plates and then making those plates into cables and then making those cables into circuits, which is quite long and convoluted, but it's quite interesting to note that if you get productivity 3s, then it's break even, but if you get all the way up to productivity 4, then it's going to actually be better. We don't have productivity 4s, we do have productivity 3s, but not in large enough quantities to want to spray them out into something that's making something as cheap as green circuits, at least not yet. And so, at this point, there is no point in going for the 3-step process. We might as well go for the 2-step, because it's a bit more compact. And of course, having done all that maths, it's been pointed out to me that we also have some bonuses on copper plate production from going to Igris and other similar places. So we have a productivity bonus of an additional 90% there, and that means that if we did have a machine turning molten copper into copper plates, that would actually have a productivity bonus of 180% with the productivity modules in there, compared to only 90% on the machine making the cables. That is of course going to throw all the numbers off, and I think will make quite a significant difference. But I thought it'd be interesting to try this one out and see what happens. So I've set this up in the Blueprint sandbox, box, we've got the chain that we're using at the moment on Nauvis, where we've got the molten copper being turned into the cable, being put into a box to cool, and then being turned into green circuits here. And we've got an infinite supply of iron plates down here just to take that part out of the equation. And then we've got the alternative recipe, which is where you take your tank of molten copper, you turn it into plates, which again need to be cooled, and then turn into cables in an EM plant, and then passed over to be made into green circuits, which can then be put into the other box over here. So if I turn this on by dropping in an infinite power source here, then these machines will start to run, and we'll give them a moment or two to trickle through, and we'll see how many green circuits we get from each one. The other thing that could be done in here to throw the numbers off even further would be to use quality productivity modules in the various machines through here, and that would allow us to boost the productivity even higher than the 10% per module that we're currently getting, all the way up to a theoretical maximum of plus 25% if we were using legendary modules, which obviously we can't make at the moment. But that is an enormous difference and would completely throw off the numbers as well. And here we go, the system has now finished churning through all the copper that was in those two tanks. And the system we're using down on Nauvis at the moment, where we turn the molten copper straight into cable and then into circuits, well, I had to put in a second chest for each of these because they produce so many green circuits. But here you can see we produced about 9,000 of them if we include all the qualities. And then this other chest has got about 300. So we're looking at about 9,300, maybe call it 9,500. The other system has also filled up a chest here, so we've got about just over 9,000 in that one as well. And then this other chest has got about 5,000 in it. So we've gone from about 9,500 to about 14,000. So we were looking at about 50% extra from including the extra recipe here in order to make the cables. And if we look at the numbers through here, you can see that this one is as predicted, giving that plus 100% productivity. And that compensates for the difference between making the cables directly and making the plates directly, because making the cables directly, if you ignore all productivity bonuses, produces about twice as much. However, when we then include the 90% productivity bonus for making plates, bringing this individual step up to plus 180%, that means we are then getting significantly more out. And I'll put the numbers on screen here as usual. And so this leads us to the conclusion that actually if we do want to get the absolute maximum out of it that we should, well, we're going to have to redesign that system again and stick in some extra EM plants. Anyway, after that slight aside, what we have here is a system that is making a large quantity of green circuits. And we have quality modules in the final step of this process, the one that's making the actual green circuits themselves. Because if you put quality modules into the earlier stages, you then have to have some sort of system for sorting out the higher tier ones, taking them away, and then reusing them somewhere else. And so we reckon it's easier just to put them in the final step, and then we're dumping those all out onto the belt over here. And as you can see, we've got separate inserters. We've got a stack inserter that's unloading the standard quality ones, and then we've got a bulk inserter that's unloading any higher tier ones. Then those are all being brought down here to a sortometron, where they can then be dumped out into a station for various different tiers. And as you can see at the moment, the standard normal tier 1 circuits are running through at speed along here and being loaded back into the station because we have a train here that's picking some of those up, so we need to restock that. However, the 2s and the 3s have stopped because we've got enough of those. Once this fills back up again, and then also with the 2s and the 3s, those are then going to be sent off this way to be recycled. So we're basically, this is similar to some systems you may have seen before in previous videos, where we're allowing each tier through until the station has enough of those, and then we're stopping them running through and we're recycling them. And the recyclers also have quality modules in them, and that means with this particular step we then get an outpouring of the ingredients that go into those circuits. As you can see, we've got 2s, 3s and 4s coming out along here mostly, and that's because the 2s and the 3s are coming from the circuits that are being recycled, and the 4s are from when the quality modules in the recyclers strike and allow you to get something of a slightly higher quality out. All of that stuff is then being passed up to an array of machines over here, so we're making quality 1, quality 2, quality 3, 4 and eventually 5 down the bottom here, once we eventually research it. And so all of these parts are being passed through. There's more quality modules in all of these machines except the 5s at the bottom, because you can't go higher than 5, so we've got productivities in there instead. And that means we're then unloading those circuits onto the belts here, and they can be brought round, and they're going down the same belts over here, and so we'll pass those through and we'll see if we get anything that we actually want. And so the idea of this is it's just going to continuously churn through all of the different tiers of circuits until you get better and better and better ones, and then the trains can come in and pick those up from the station down here. The C counter here is how many of each type we would like to have, so this is set to 33,000, and if we look on here you can see that we've got 33,000 tier 2 and 3, 27,000 tier 4, that's impressive, and only 24,000 tier 1 because they keep getting taken away to be made into other things. But this will gradually fill up, and eventually we'll have enough of all of them, and then I imagine we'll just start churning through all of the 4s and destroying them because we can't make 5s, so they'll just go round and round in circles forever. But to be honest, we should have some sort of system on here to turn it off when we get enough of everything, but I don't think that's been added in just yet. Maybe it will be eventually. And then next door, Mike took Marc's build for inspiration and has done the same sort of thing with the red circuits. And so this is bringing in green circuits over here, and plastic and molten copper. Once again, we're making the molten copper into cables, and then feeding that and all the other ingredients down into a load of machines here that are then trying to make red circuits. In fact, they are making red circuits. Those then get poured down here, where some of them can go, where they can all go down into the station at the bottom to be loaded up. And at the moment, we're still trying for 33,000 of each, because that's a nice number. And we've got 50,000 of the tier 1s, so something's gone a little bit funny there. Maybe the filters weren't put in until a little bit later. We've got 33,000 of the tier 2s. You can see the 1s and the 2s are stopped along there. And we're dribbling the 3s through, and occasionally there'll probably be a 4 coming through as well. And then any that don't make it are then being passed over to the recyclers here, which seem to have jammed up a bit, which is a bit of a shame. And so those are being recycled. We're getting plastic and green circuits and copper cable back out again. And as you can see, these are of varying different qualities. And they're then being passed over here to other machines that are going to then be remaking them. Unfortunately, there don't seem to be enough machines doing the tier 1 to hopefully tier 2, but maybe not. Nudge over here. There's an additional block of them down here as well, and it's still not enough. So looking over here, maybe we should make the entire bottom row doing the tier 1s, and then have 2 modules doing tier 2. Maybe even 2 on 3, and then 4 or 5. I don't know, but the numbers need to be shuffled around a little bit, because this is clearly woefully inadequate for dealing with the tier 1 quality. But you know, it's a system that's been built up and then can be improved and built upon as necessary. To be fair, it is working. It's just working a lot slower than it could be if it was processing through all of these byproducts a lot faster. So, some improvements needed here, but essentially it's the same sort of general idea. We're bringing in the ingredients at normal quality, we're then making the product, and then any that aren't of a high enough quality are being recycled back down and then rebuilt, and then the hope that next time we'll be lucky and we'll get a slightly higher quality piece out. Additionally noteworthy, I think, is that on the outputs to these stations, we have some things that are stripping out any of the circuits that come through that are a slightly higher quality, and then passing them down here and round through here to go through the recycling system and then go straight into the elevated tier production system. Now that isn't actually running yet because there's a missing piece of belt here, and although down here it does seem to be okay and actually set up. However, I don't think we're actually calling for higher tier green circuits over here because, well, there's so many of them over here that we'd have pulled some of those through by now. So this system clearly has not been set up yet to call for any higher tier electronic circuits. We could do that. We could put in a request here for a quantity of tier 2s and tier 3s and see how it goes. I suppose the worry with that is that you might overfill the station, although you could be careful with the numbers that you're bringing in to make sure that's okay. But also you might throw the ratios off, because over here, in theory at least, in the long run we're going to get the same amount of tier 3 green circuits, tier 3 cables and tier 3 plastic coming out, because we're rolling the same dice every single time. The probabilities are the same for everything. But if we chuck in a load of tier 3 green circuits, then we're going to have loads and loads of tier 3 green circuits filling up the chests here, and then we're not going to have enough copper or plastic coming through to keep the system happy, so it's going to struggle. As it is, we seem to have slightly different numbers coming through over here. We've got a slightly heavy, we've got more of the cables and plastic on this side, and cables and green circuits on this side, so we could do with some more green circuits in here, we could do with some more plastic in here, but I think that's just from sort of the randomness and the vagaries of which way the things tend to go. So it should balance itself out more or less in the long run. Although I do notice that we have 151 copper cable there and 170 there. So we do seem to be getting quite a lot more copper cable through than I would strictly expect given those numbers. Especially if there's only 7 green circuits and 24 plastic. So that's interesting. I don't know why those numbers are a little bit out, but they do seem to be, and that's a little bit weird. And then next we have a similar thing where Mike has built a blue circuit production facility over here, where it's exactly the same sort of thing. Sulfuric acid coming in at the top, red circuits over here, green circuits over here, and once again making the blue circuits in machines that are as full of the best quality modules that we have. Well, tier 3s anyway. We haven't gone in for the qualities yet, but we've got tier 3 ones in there at least. So that's a 12.5% quality chance on each machine. And then they're coming down here, another grinder and sorter here. And then exactly the same sort of problem over here with too much normal quality stuff coming through. And Mike has tried to fix that a bit by having the green circuits coming around this way to go round back in at the start again when there's an excess of them. That again shouldn't work because it should throw off the ratios, but it will at least take off some of the pressure. We've got 9.6 thousand green compared to 8.4 thousand red, but the recipe for a blue circuit requires 10 times as many green circuits. So ideally we would have 10 times as many green circuits as we would red. So this is all going to be way out of ratio and is going to cause all kinds of problems. So that's unfortunate, but I guess we could, if we got desperate, bring some red circuits from over here into this area down here and top it up, but yeah, it's all a little bit weird. Over here, however, we're seeing 6.2 thousand in that one and just under 600 in this one. So those are relatively close to the 10 to 1 that I would expect. On the other side, again, 6,000 and nearly 600. It's not quite as close as I would expect it to be and would like it to be, but it's also not too far off. So I feel like this is roughly as I would expect the system to appear. The next one is quality plastic using the Nauvis method, and I talked about this in a previous video, but I've made a few little changes to it, so I'll quickly talk about those. But once again, this is exactly the same sort of system on the output, with the sorter that's passing around the stuff that we have enough of for recycling, and then and letting through the ones that we want to top up, and then blocking at the end. And there you go, so there are 3 going through there, but the 2s and the 1s have been blocked because we've got enough of those. And then anything we don't want comes down to the recyclers down here, which again have the quality modules in them, so we can upgrade those and then have the better quality ones coming through here, hopefully. At least hopefully. Part of the reason I needed to do some redesigning here was because I forgot that when I originally built it, I built it with productivity modules in mind. So it was productivity all the way through, and then Marc said he wanted it to be a quality build, so I took out all the productivity modules and put in quality modules instead. However, I forgot that I'd put in speed beacons, and putting in a speed beacon next to a quality assembler doesn't really work, because speed works against quality, and so we ended up with a nice, neat minus 10% quality bonus. Now, I don't think you can actually go below 0 on that, so it doesn't actually matter. It's no worse than being at 0. It doesn't actively lower the quality of the stuff you're making. However, it did mean that absolutely everything that was coming out was quality 1, rather than being given a little bit of a nudge like some of the stuff you can see coming through here. So that wasn't ideal, but I've done a little bit of a redesign, and it turns out that with 2 speed modules and 2 productivity modules, then these 2 machines run at about the same speed. So we've got 14.1 per second coming out of that one, and 12.5 per second going into this one. That's close enough that I'm prepared to use direct insertion like this. And then you've got all the other stuff around it that's taking out anything that goes off, loading in the products we want, and then taking things out over here. And once again, yeah, sometimes we have to dump things that have gone off, but we can take that out onto the other side of the belt. And similarly to what Mike and Marc have been doing, I've got a stack inserter bringing out the normal quality, because that tends to be most of what comes out, and so we can just dump that onto the belt here. And then I've got a bulk inserter that's taking out any dead Cupria Vidas and also any higher quality plastic, so that can be taken out separately, and you don't risk jamming up the stack inserter, which is very, very important. This system does seem to be a little bit overloaded, like the belts are not fast enough to take away everything we're producing, but I believe that's just because we're not pulling it in fast enough over here, because so much of it is going around the recycling system. Maybe that means we need something to be faster up here. Maybe I need a secondary sorting system, but I think at the moment this is probably good enough. I guess thinking about this, I could put in an additional quality grinder over here, so this sort of thing with the recyclers, put in a second one here, and then have a system that's set to watch this belt over here, and when this one stops because we've got enough tier 1, I could have something over here that pulls out the tier 1, and then, or from up here perhaps, and then send it down here to go through the other quality grinder, and then we'd have a bit less going through this single splitter up here. Maybe I should build it like that. That would be interesting and would be quite a nice improvement. I'll put that on the list and as something to consider in the future. Ooh, there's a load of tier 4 coming through there. That's rather nice. And there it goes down here, and then straight out into the station, because that's really high quality, that's really good plastic, and that's what we like to see. Because we've been making all of these high quality city blocks to produce the resources at a higher tier of quality, that means there were quite a lot of old systems that are now completely redundant. So Marc has been going around pulling all of those out, and I can't point to them because they've all gone. But you'll see every so often, you'll see little bits like this where there was clearly something built here that is now no longer there. And so all of the old circuit production, all of the old plastic production has all been pulled out. While he's been doing that, he's also put in additional tree growing all the way around the outside, so all of these blocks along here are full of agricultural towers that are growing trees as fast as they can, and these are providing the wood that the rest of the factory is using. Because as you'll remember, the plastic production that I've set up gets through a lot of wood, all the plastic comes from wood. Additionally, the upgrades to the oil production facility that I was talking about in the last video, that's using quite a lot of wood as well to make the wood pulp to make down here. And in general, we're getting through quite a lot of wood in the factory, so it's good to have plenty of it being grown, and it also works as a really nice filter to capture any pollution that's trying to sneak its way out of the factory. So if I turn on the pollutionometer, you can see it's quite dark coming all the way up to here, and then there's a really obvious line across there where all the pollution is being sucked up by these trees, or I say where a lot of the pollution is being sucked up by these trees, and therefore a lot less of it is escaping from the factory, and therefore we won't have as many biters to deal with in the future. We've also got, over here you can see there's a lake running across here, which means we're leaking quite a lot more pollution, and in fact I think this one, yes, this block here is on sand rather than soil. soil, and so a lot of the tree growing just isn't working. This one over here, for example, can grow 1 tree at a time. This one here can grow 5 trees at a time, and so on and so on. These are not as effective as most of them are, so we don't have as many trees there, and therefore the pollution is leaking out a little bit more from this area. Down the side over here, the same sort of thing. You can see this is all blocked off, and then blocked off down here. There's a little bit leaking out here because there's a uranium mine, so it's able to get through a bit better. But basically, we're doing quite a good job with these tree blocks of keeping the pollution inside our factory. For some reason, we ran out of sand. You'd think there was enough being produced from all of the copper and iron crushing that we're doing in the various blocks around the factory. Like these ones over here, where we're producing at least a quantity of sand that can then be passed over and out to stations over here. But I guess actually that's not that much sand, especially compared to the amount of iron we're producing over here. And so I suppose it's not too much of a surprise that we've needed to make a little bit more. And so Marc has copied that design again, and over here we are now making a quantity of sand. I don't know why this train is sat here. That seems to be a very, very confused train. So there's no filter set on these bulk inserters, which is why they're not loading. It's supposed to be set from the circuit conditions, and we should have a connection going from this output here through this, apparently maybe through this lamp and then across here to go to all of these inserters across here. However, oh, I see what's happened. The red circuit here goes over to this combinator, and then that's been plugged into the station instead of into the outputs for the station. So there's a cable in the wrong place there. So I suspect if I just put a green cable there instead of and remove, and we've got an error. So maybe I need to remove that one, and that's still wrong because we're multiplying everything by -1 over here. So we should be taking this sand request and feeding it into all of these inserters over here. So for example, I could fix this by changing this to 1 and just passing the number straight through, and there we go. Now it's working, but I don't really want to go and mess around with someone else's build quite like that because that might not be quite how it's supposed to work. But you know, that will kind of work, and it will pull all the sand out into this system. Now let's have a look at this station over here, which as far as I'm aware is working. So here we are feeding again from the station into this. Oh, I see. There's supposed to be another red cable going from the output of the station to the output of this combinator. So if I come back down here again, so we should have a red cable going from there to there, and we shouldn't have a green cable going from there to there, but presumably we should have a green cable going from there to there. So I put it back, but I've now added in that red cable, and it is still working. It's still loading the trains up. Oh, I see. Yes, the green cable that comes from here is to read the train contents. So you subtract the train contents from the train's request, and then when the train has the right amount of sand in it, it will stop loading. There we go. That makes sense. Tristan has been rebuilding and tweaking the science parks, so we now have, I believe we still have 2 of these. There's one here and one here, and they're both clamouring for, presumably for better modules and better machines in them as well. So we're trying to make these science parks as efficient as possible. We're putting in the best productivity modules we have, we're putting in the best science labs we have, which basically we're trying to get as much science out of each bottle of science we ship in over here, just to make things run as fast as possible. And at the moment we seem to be doing about 588 science per minute. That's not bad, but I thought we were supposed to be doing about twice that. Maybe we've got a shortage somewhere of something. Yeah, none of these are actually running, so maybe there's a shortage of at least one of the types of science here. I don't know, it's hard to tell what we're short of, because if we've run out of something, then you'll just see a completely empty column there. So the labs are, interestingly, the labs are missing agricultural science packs for some reason, and then over here there aren't any being passed out. Oh, this has been turned off. You can see in here this inserter has been rotated to turn this off. Tristan probably has a good reason for that. Maybe it's because we're waiting for this to be a bit more upgraded. Maybe it's because he hasn't finished doing a job over here. But we are currently running at half speed because we're not dumping the agricultural science out onto the system in order to do that particular type of science. The other block, though, is running nicely, and that's where we're getting our sort of 500 per minute from. And as you can see, this has been rearranged, so instead of having that sort of slightly weird pattern of labs we had before, it's now been sort of tidied up, neatened up, brought a bit closer together, and then maybe we're putting a few extra packs of each type onto the belt over here to make sure all of the labs run. And I think we might not be doing quite enough of that, because there's quite a few of them over here at the end that aren't running. So maybe it needs to be about, well, we've got 9 columns working reasonably well, and then another 2 that aren't. So let's try increasing it by 10% just to see what happens. So instead of 260, let's make that 300. We can then dump a few more of each pack onto the belt here. It's going to be a little bit dense along here and a bit solid while they sort of flow through and start flowing around. But that'll quickly calm down, as you can see now, and we'll just have the extra science packs flowing around, and maybe we'll be able to do science a little bit more quickly. As before, we're pulling out any spoilage that finds its way around over here. Any of the agricultural sciences get pulled out here and then taken up and around, put back in again at the top in order to put them into the ice chests over here to allow them to recover a little bit, which means all the ones in the box down here at the bottom should be at about 50%, and they do seem to be, and that's going quite nicely. So nothing has really changed in the basic concept of how the science park works over here, but there's been a little bit of rearrangement of some of the machines. And the final thing I want to look at in this video is this block over here that Mike has built in order to make fertiliser. Making fertiliser seems to be a very Mike thing to do because this is at least the second planet he's done it on. And so this involves bringing in sulfuric acid and carbon and then dissolving one in the other. With some water, and that produces fertiliser. Who knew? I'm sure a chemist will be able to tell me that that is very, very realistic and is exactly how fertiliser is made, but I'm afraid I don't actually know. Still, it seems to make a load of it, and we filled the station over here up with that. I think the original plan may have been to make that to do the biter egg recovery process, so where you can use that to have a 99% chance of bringing a biter egg or a pentapod egg back up to 90% freshness, with a 1% chance of accidentally destroying it on the way through. I don't know how useful that process is going to be. I think, given that we're using the ice chests in order to maintain the freshness of everything, having a system that uses fertiliser to bring them back up to 90% is probably not that useful, because in general we don't have anything where it matters how fresh a biter egg is before you make something out of it. All the things we can make out of biter eggs, or at least might want to make out of biter eggs, are not things that are affected by freshness. So you can't have a 50% fresh productivity module, for example. Now there are a few things where that might be an exception. So we've got a biter egg cloning process over here, so maybe for that it could be worthwhile. Although at that point, why don't we just grow more biter eggs? Maybe because we want the 5% chance of getting anomalous biter eggs. Who knows? This isn't something we've discovered yet. But you can make them into nutrients, and again, nutrients do have a freshness, so maybe that would be worthwhile. But honestly, why wouldn't you make them from something else like wood? Here is the mending that I was talking about. There are golden biter eggs. Maybe that would be a worthwhile thing to try and make freshly. And again, another nutrient recipe, Prometheum Salad. There are a few recipes that do have a freshness involved, but I feel that most of them, it's not going to be a particularly big deal. We're not going to care how fresh a biter egg is before we use it. If it's a 50%, that's going to be absolutely fine. Fertiliser does have a few other uses, so you can make some of the weird overgrowth soil for glebe out of it, but we're already making it on glebe, so we don't need it from here. You can barrel it up. You can use it for growing trees in space, but we've already got that set up, and we're just making the fertiliser in space for those. You can, same with growing Yamako and jelly nut in space, but again, if we wanted to do that, we'd make the fertiliser in space. So it is just the biter egg mending and possibly the pentapod egg mending, but I don't really see the use for those. So I don't know if we're ever going to use that fertiliser block, but it's there, and it means we've got it's another product that we have available on Nauvis if we ever decide we want it. And so that is everything for this planet. You're now up to date on everything we've done down on Nauvis. So if you want to see what we're going to do next to this planet, or more likely to another planet that we've now headed off to, come and join us at 7:30 PM UK time on Monday for the next stream, where the 5 of us will be beating our heads against another planet, or possibly tweaking things on the existing ones if something breaks. If you fancy giving Planetary Pioneers a try yourself, you can grab the mod from the Factorio mod portal, install that in your Factorio, use the seed 11111 to play in the same universe as us, at least if the mod updates will allow for that. And if you produce anything exciting or interesting, let us know on the Discord, because it's always nice to see other people's builds. I'll be back again on Wednesday for another stream, probably playing something completely different by then, or maybe I'll still be trying to finish off Foundry. Who knows? We shall see. And these videos will be coming out on Thursday and Friday as usual, so please make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel so you don't miss out on anything. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.